It seems like yesterday, but I am a parent of a neurodivergent child, and because of what we were experiencing early on with our son, and because of the experience actually my husband had growing up, where he had undiagnosed dyslexia and ADHD. And, he unfortunately did have a teacher in front of the class tell him he was stupid and lazy. And it's heartbreaking to hear because we know that our neurodivergent children don't need to be told that because they actually already feel that. They feel so isolated from being understood, from being accepted. They already feel that they don't belong, whether it's with their, behaviors, with reading, with socially, with academically. There's already that component. And then early on, when I saw that happening with my son, it was just sad to me and perplexing that a 5-year-old was being so ostracized in school. He was in the principal's office for half day kindergarten pretty much every day. And so as a parent, you feel lost, you feel alone, you feel exhausted, overwhelmed, you're not sure where to go. And so I felt the passion to say, how do I build a community that supports parents to let you know you're not alone on this journey? A lot of people experience and feel and understand exactly what you're going through. And so the first thing that I did was create a directory of providers because that's the one area, you go through this and you're like, what services first are out there? How do I support my child? And then how do I go about finding them, vetting the process, understanding the process? So the first thing I did was create a directory of providers that I personally meet with to find out why are you doing what you're doing? How are you supporting families? How are you supporting parents? What does that look like? And so when you go to my website, guidingbrightminds.com, you will find amazing providers. And you know what I always tell parents is also, just because they're on this directory doesn't mean they're going to be a great fit either. But just know that they have been vetted. I personally meet with them and I talk to them about their mission and vision, but for you to do the research, and usually I suggest interviewing or talking to 3 different providers. I know in the beginning, especially if you're on the first steps of your journey, you're not sure exactly what to ask. But go from the heart and from the gut of what you think your child needs and find out from the provider, how long have you been doing this? What does this look like? How do you support me as parents? Because that's what I have also found on my journey, that I, as a parent, needed a lot of help and support. I needed to be also, again, around a community that gets it, that understands, that's willing to have some hard conversations and discussions and allow you to be vulnerable and just raw with your feelings and emotions as well, because that's true and that's real every single day. So I'm so excited. If you're not familiar with Guiding Bright Minds, please go to the website, check us out. You'll find on the website also events posted, a lot of blogs and articles on so many different topics. So lots of resources at your fingertips. I call it a one-stop shop for all neurodivergent needs and supports. I'm also excited to announce that we have launched our third annual Neurodiversity Resource Fair. So if you are in the Colorado area, in the Denver metro area, it's on June 21st from 10 to 2 at Accelerated Schools. All that information is on my website. So be sure to definitely check it out. And just like today, we offer free webinars with wonderful professionals and experts like Christy, who's here today. And I'm excited about this conversation. I think we do need to have more of it as we talk about just in general, our overall well-being and health, which we know is so important in how we manage our daily lives and how we manage those obstacles that do come our way. And having that wellness, having that health is a key component of getting through it as well. So I think that's all I wanted to share with you all, except for I'm so excited. The webinar today, our Ask the Expert series, supporting physical wellness in teens. Christy Barr has had years of experience in this field. She's a licensed professional counselor and has her own business in supporting families. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy to introduce herself and share with y'all what she does, and get in this topic of conversation. There is an opportunity to ask questions. You can use the Q&A. You'll see the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And as she's talking, we'll wait till the end to go through the questions, but please put those in there so that way we can address any concerns, any questions, any comments that you have as we go through this presentation. Thank you all so much. Christy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tiffany. I am so excited to be here today. Just like Tiffany said, I am a licensed professional counselor out here in Colorado. I've been really in the counseling therapy field for the last decade, which is wild to even say. And through my experience, it's led me to open my practice as of last year, March 2024. So I'm excited. I just recently celebrated my 1 year for my business, which is exciting. So one of my many passions in this field is about creating the connection for folks with mind and body. And I think we all have a desire to really understand this more. And I I just have found that I have an avenue to share my passion in the work that I do. So what I do as a therapist is I have my practice in Golden, Colorado. And in that practice, I work with individuals, teens, adults as young as 11, all the way through adulthood. I do primarily work in the neurodiverse population, and that's part of why I wanted to be a Guiding Bright Minds member, so that I can really spread the good word about not just what I'm doing, but all of the other providers that are a part of Guiding Bright Minds as well. So I also see neurotypical folks, but I think now as we learn more and more, there's a lot more neurodivergence that I think people even realize. So I'm here to support you. And so I do that I really focus on an experiential and somatic modality, which really just means I bring experiences into session. And somatic is just the connection between mind and body. And so this presentation, I think, really encapsulates a lot of the education I end up giving to parents and to teens, so that they can learn more about their brain, how it works, how it's working for them, not against them, and all of the complexities. So I hope that you all enjoy learning a little bit more today about that. So I'll jump right in and start sharing my screen here. Okay. I think it looks like it's working. Yes. Okay, perfect. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about supporting physical wellness in teens. You're going to notice that I have a lot of information that, of course, is specific to teens, but I do like to go beyond that and say a lot of this is just really helpful information for anybody. I'm just going to be specifically speaking about the teen brain, some of the neurological differences, so that we can consider that as we're talking about teens and physical wellness. So this is me. I know I just introduced myself, but sometimes people have found it helpful to have the QR code if you want to check out my website, learn even more about what I do. I have a lot of information on there. As I said before, I work primarily in the somatic and experiential approach. Something that I didn't mention is that also includes therapeutic rock climbing. So I will bring teens, young adults into the rock climbing gym. I actually do family therapy in the gym as well. And there's just a lot of opportunity there to practice the skills that I'm helping and teach my clients and families. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'll dive in to what we're going to be going over today. So I really just have 5 sections that I want to talk about. What is physical well-being? What does that even mean to us? I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about the teenage brain, some of the neurological pieces. Like I said, I pride myself in being a little nerdy about the brain. So I just have fun sharing that information in a way that isn't too heady, that we can really walk away with tangible information that we can take with us. We're going to talk a little bit about physical activity in terms of how do we get teens, young people engaged in physical activity? How is that beneficial to their brain development and their mental and emotional well-being? We're going to talk a little bit about sleep, the importance of sleep, and some of the differences that I've learned about sleep patterns in teens. And then the big one, I would say, is managing stress and how physical wellness and physical activity can help with that stress management, but also just some of those pieces as well. So we'll get right into it. So, whenever I was really looking into what physical well-being actually was, there were a ton of different definitions that I didn't realize. And so as I sorted through these, none of them quite fit. So I did a little combination of definitions. So this is my combination definition. And that's really physical well-being is focused attention placed on the care and health of our bodies. Now, what's funny is, of course, we can't just care for our physical bodies without also caring for our minds and emotional well-being. No matter how hard we try, they are connected. So how we really care for our bodies just translates completely. So a lot of times I will point this out because that mind-body connection can be overlooked. What we're going to cover today is, again, that connection that not only is wired in our brain, but that where physical activity and physical well-being can really show up in our day-to-day. So something that I like to start with is this healthy mind platter. Now, this may be familiar to some. This isn't mine. I didn't create it, but Dr. Dan Siegel, he coined this idea of a healthy mind platter, but I use this all the time with the folks that I'm working with. And a lot of times, I know we can't boil everything down to a checklist, but when we are feeling stuck or we're wondering what's maybe missing in our day-to-day life to support our well-being, I come to this healthy mind platter. So the idea is it's not so much like the food pyramid where there's certain foods, you need this much and that much. When we think about the healthy mind platter, truly imagine it as a platter that we could use a little bit of each of these in every single day. And so, with going down this list, physical time is really focused on getting our heart rate up. Doesn't mean that we need to be doing a full-on workout, but whatever that might be, that we can have focused time that we're moving our bodies. Sleep time is really, again, focused on a consistent and regulated amount of sleep. So everybody ranges a little bit more than others. And so for teens, they often need a little bit more sleep because of all of the change that's going on in their brains and bodies. But sleep time, we'll talk about that more as well. Connect time, I really like to highlight in this section that connecting virtually is one thing and connecting in person is another. And oftentimes, what I have seen in the work that I've done is a blend of both connecting virtually and in person is really the great combo in the world that we live in to getting a good amount of social connection and feeling that sense of belonging with other people. And then time in, this is really focused on self-reflection. Oftentimes when I talk with clients about this list, time in is most commonly the one that people go, I don't really do that. I don't take the time to reflect on how I'm feeling or how I'm doing day to day. And so this one I like to hone in on. And we can do this in really simple ways that it doesn't have to be us meditating for an hour each day. Sometimes it can be simply journaling for 5 minutes. It can be doing a grounding activity where we just take time to notice the physical sensations in our bodies in that moment. So that's really what time in means. And then we have downtime. Most teens, when I mention downtime, they're like, make sure you tell my parents this, because downtime is time for our brain to kind of go offline for a little bit. So I joke you could have downtime by staring at a wall and watching paint dry, or a lot of times Netflix is the option. Like, oh, I don't have to think. I can watch my comfort show. Downtime is really important as part of our day-to-day life for this idea of having just a good sense of well-being. And then focus time. For teens, this is oftentimes school, homework. For adults, it's our work. Maybe we're reading a book. That's really what focus time is. And then playtime. This is another one that as we age, we forget about playtime. And playtime is really simply having fun for the purpose of having fun. And so when we're younger, this happens a lot more organically because it's what we have. And then as we get older, we start to get in our head and do a lot of thinking, get focused on work or school. And so playtime is another one that I really like to highlight. And for adults, a lot of times that's, hey, do you have a pet? Do you have a child that you can just engage in some play and to really support that part of our well-being? So that is the Healthy Mind Platter. Okay, so this is where we're going to get a little nerdy and talk a little bit more in depth about the teenage brain. So there's a lot on this slide, and so we're going to take it one step at a time. So in general, there's a lot happening during puberty in the teenage brain. Now, according to research, most commonly that's between the ages of 10 to 13. In my opinion, it's happening and we're growing all the way through our older teenage years. And so there are higher levels of plasticity. So plasticity is just a fancy word for flexibility of the brain. And so here's the really good news. Teenage brains are at a peak place for learning and adjusting and adapting to new things. So, in fact, their brain craves novelty. And so there's something that I go, okay, it's not all bad, right? There are good things when we're talking about the teenage brain. And so that plasticity is also really helpful for connecting socially, the ability to adapt. So there's, of course, side conversations to be had if your child is somebody who demonstrates more of the rigidity and stuck thinking that comes with some aspects of neurodivergence. But again, all of what we're talking about today can support that. There are a lot of changes that are happening in the limbic system. So the limbic system is where we regulate emotions and we have those feelings of reward. So I like to think about the limbic system, which is that picture on the right side of the slide. I like to think of it as the emotional nervous system. So it connects both physical and emotional well-being. And I like this picture of the brain because it kind of shows the inside view. If we kind of cut the brain in half and looked on the inside and the outside view. So it really just shows you how this is really a really deep part of the brain that we're seeing here. So we're not going to be able to get into all of the details of the limbic system, but there are a few parts that I want to include and point out to you. So you'll see the hypothalamus, and that's, let's see, right here in this picture. And that is responsible for producing hormones. It helps manage sleep and mood. And then we have the amygdala here. And the amygdala is how we experience emotions and where we feel fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. This is also where social interpretations are created. And then the hippocampus, that is where we create and store memories and where we connect them to emotion. And so that idea of when a certain memory comes up and a certain emotion is usually tied with it, that's the hippocampus doing its job. So I know I can't really see who's on the screen here, but I like to engage us all in a little activity just so we can learn a little bit more about what the brain really looks like. So on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you'll see that hand model of the brain and this idea of flipping our lid. So the hand model of the brain, it simplifies all of that complex information that I just gave. So what I will ask, if you are willing, I can't see you, so we'll see if you end up doing it. But if you put your right or left hand up, just like this, and then tuck your thumb in, so it's just nice and tucked, and then put your 4 fingers on top of that, you've now created the hand model of the brain. So these 4 fingers that you have in front, those represent our prefrontal cortex. So this is where our executive functioning and logical thinking, that's where all of that happens. So if I were to just jokingly facepalm, right, this is going to be our prefrontal cortex. When we lift our fingers up, this is our limbic system, that deepest part of the brain. And so sometimes parents will ask, well, gosh, it just seems like things go from 0 to 100. And that's what's called flipping your lid. And that's when all logical thinking goes poof, out the window and we get an emotional response. And so that sometimes is where, as a parent, you might be confused, like what just happened here? But that's that idea of flipping our lid. So the logical understanding of what's going on isn't going to happen in that moment because we're living in our emotions and our fight or flight here. And so this is where I oftentimes will offer ideas for how to calm our mind and our body so that slowly we can re-engage that front part of our brain. So I hope that all makes sense. And now you have a little handy tool that you can take with you. Okay, so the teenage brain, a little bit more information. So there is an increase in connectivity among different brain regions in teenagers. And so the limbic system will begin to interact a little bit more with that prefrontal cortex. So it doesn't always have to be all or nothing with that hand model of the brain, but actually creating more connection. And so when that happens, that connection increases, this leads teens to be more interested in risk-taking activities and separating and becoming more independent and autonomous from family and seeking new relationships. So that is part of what they're trying to figure out. Where do I stand in this world outside of my family of origin that I'm coming from? And I think this also too can help normalize that idea of, oh my gosh, why is my teen interested in all this risky business, right? Well, it's just literally where their brains are wired at this time. And so that's one aspect of another, piece of so many that are happening in the teenage brain. And then there's an increase in white matter. And white matter really just refers to a covering that goes over parts of neurons that really strengthen connections. And there's this saying that I love giving people, and it's this idea of what wires together, fires together. And so that's the video that I want to show you. So before I press play, what you're seeing right now is two neurons that are starting to make a connection with one another. And so while I play the video, I will give you the example that I oftentimes give. Oops. Let's see. Bummer. It was playing not too long ago. Let's see. Okay, well, I will describe it to you. So essentially, what you're seeing here is this is one neuron and this is another, and there are these little finger-like things. And what you'll start to see is that these are going to come closer and closer, and then they start to connect and create a very strong connection. And the example I like to give is if anybody has ever learned how to play the piano or a new instrument, it almost mimics that same exact feature because you're trying to connect different neurons that haven't really connected before. So when you first start learning scales, or I actually don't play piano, so it's funny that I give this example, but when you start to learn, it can feel very fumbly and a little strange. And then as you do it again and again, that is strengthening the connection that you're seeing. And so that idea of what wires together, fires together, the more we do something, the more likely it's going to become pretty automatic for us. And so this can be something really positive, but this can also impact us in negative ways if we are connecting things that are not healthy or helpful for us. And so that's part of the thing that I think is really neat is that this doesn't just happen in the teenage brain. This also happens for us as adults. Anytime we're engaging in something new, this is possible to have new connections of different neurons coming together and forming these strong bonds. All right, so now we're into physical activity. So in general, physical activity has been shown to improve cognitive functioning. Just like we talked about with the teenage brain, that connection of emotion and logical thinking, that's utilized and really strengthened through physical activity. It can also support the development of decision making, which is, of course, an important skill that everybody needs to learn. And information that I think is pretty common, physical activity releases endorphins and other neurotransmitters that are associated with those feelings of happiness and well-being. And if you have ever worn an Apple Watch and tracked your sleep, you'll notice that anytime we are exercising and moving our bodies, we're also promoting a deeper and more restorative sleep. And so something that I like to speak to around physical activity is depending on the person, there are folks that really like team-based activities and want to be a part of a team, but there are also people that aren't maybe ready for that or don't like to do that. And so finding something, whether it's an individual sport or a team sport, both can be really beneficial for the development of a teen and their brain and their well-being while they're engaged in that activity. So I like to give the how. And again, I don't think this is going to be a total surprise, but I do encourage, especially if there are parents on here, the how of how do we get our kids engaged in physical activity? First and foremost, teens often need modeling from adults in their lives. So my recommendation almost always is if you're not moving and you're wanting your kid to move their body, do that together. Make it an opportunity to have a fun family experience and partner with. I think a lot of times parents and kids will come across this dilemma of, I'm telling you to do something, I don't want to do that thing. And oftentimes when we can partner with, we can bypass some of the push and pull of that dynamic. Excuse me. Another piece that I like to recommend is making it a part of the routine. If something is sprung on a kid, especially when we're talking about our neurodiverse kiddos, that's really challenging. And it's really challenging to get our brain wrapped around something that we weren't expecting. So talk about it a week before, talk about it a few days before. Reminders can be so helpful for getting teens on board with something that is maybe a new part of a routine and getting input from them. Hey, what would be fun for you? Do you want to go bike riding? Do you want to try rock climbing? Finding something that is going to get them really excited about doing that activity, because remember, their brains are looking for risk taking. So if we can do that in a healthy and contained way within the family, that's awesome. We love that. And then, like I said before, this is where an introduction to a team sport or a more independent sport could be an option for kids as well. Okay, so on to sleep. A little bit more nerdy information. So due to hormonal changes in puberty, melatonin is actually active later in the evening, which I didn't know until I started diving into this research. So when teens are like, well, I'm not tired, I want to stay up late, why are you making me go to bed so early? They're not just saying that. It's actually been proven, and you'll see this in this graph. This is the childhood circadian phase right here. And this is like, I think this showed to be like 8 p.m., 7 p.m. at night. And then this dotted line, this is more of the adolescent circadian phase. And so I think it actually showed like 11 or 12 o'clock at night. So when when teenagers are saying, I'm not tired, well, it doesn't mean that you have to shift their bedtime, but it's just another piece of knowledge that I think can be really helpful. That again, this is literally what their body is wired to do. And so it's to go to sleep later and to wake up later. Now, if your kids are in the typical school system, that's challenging because school starts early. So it's just something to keep in mind. And I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about some strategies around sleep. So teens need more sleep due to all of the different changes that are happening in their bodies and their brains. They're growing. Uh, excuse me. Screen time, there's no surprise to this. It does impact your melatonin levels. And oftentimes people will say you get a melatonin crash. So if you are on your phone or some blue light device, it's going to impact your ability to utilize the melatonin in the ways that help you have a really healthy and regulated sleep experience. And so I think the other piece of this is that lack of quality sleep can lead to cognitive issues and increase in risky decision making that may not be healthy. So it's just something to keep in mind when we're looking at sleep. So again, what do we do when it comes to sleep? We want to come from uh, a supportive lens to really allow for, if we need to make changes in sleep routines, that we do that partnered with, and we can come with compassion and curiosity to kids feeling tired or kids waking up still feeling tired. And so a few things that I typically will recommend are having consistent routines. If you can make sure that screen time ends an hour before they're going to bed, awesome. If that's possible, that's going to really be helpful for their brain. And again, having them be a partner in that communication with us. Hey, what sounds reasonable to you? Of course, being the parent, you have the decision making ability, but oftentimes teens really value being partnered with, hey, you can choose these two options. No screen 1 hour before bed or an hour and a half. What would you prefer? It still gives us the same result of getting them off screens. And then sleeping in on the weekends, what I have read is that we don't want to just let kids like sleep all day to necessarily catch up on sleep, but usually an extra hour can really be helpful for them, and it doesn't throw them too far off their routine. There are a lot of options of how we can wind down as we're getting ready for sleep each night. And so having a winding down routine. And again, if we can mirror that as adults in teens' lives, that's going to be really helpful. And just another shameless plug for physical activity, supporting deeper sleep. They're going to feel more tired at night because they will have moved their bodies that same day. So that's just another piece to add in there as well. Okay, so if you were to reflect on what happens when someone says, you seem so stressed out, or why are you so stressed out? I know that can make me more stressed hearing that and going, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? It can make our blood boil. However, if we practice this idea of being curious with ourselves and our bodies, we can start to learn a little bit more about what that actually means for us. And so here I like to divvy up the difference between feeling stressed and feeling overwhelmed. So stress is evaluating the demand as beyond our ability to cope. Like, I don't know if I can get it all done. And then overwhelm is an extreme level of emotional or cognitive intensity to feel like I'm not able to function. There's so much going on that now I am sitting back almost frozen because I don't know where to start and I have no ability emotionally or cognitively to make a plan. So I think that distinction can be really important for us as adults. And when we're looking at teens, how are they showing up? Are they really high up in their stress, or have they gone over their tipping point and now they're overwhelmed? And so as adults in these teens' lives, I am a big proponent of noticing these things. Hey, I'm noticing that you're doing X, Y, and Z, and it's leading to, you're feeling a little bit stressed. Is that true? I could be wrong. And so when we can notice and be curious, we can offer a different opportunity for them to start to reflect, well, yeah, I think I am feeling a little stressed because versus them feeling like they're in the wrong or they're in trouble because of stress. And so something that I recommend just about to everybody that I work with is there are different strategies for different situations based on the level of stress. So ultimately, our goal is to calm our nervous system down. And so we can do that in a few different ways. So so there's this idea that if you have a lot of extra energy, a lot of times high energy feelings like anger, people typically feel uncomfortable with, and they go, "Whoa, I don't know what to do about that." And just to put this out there, this idea of shake it out that I have on this slide, that's not necessarily meant to be in a public situation, but when you have a time where you can be in your room or be in your house and literally, if we were to do it together, like just start shaking out your hands and then eventually hopping around, shaking out our bodies, right? We're going to help that energy move through our body versus it being pent up and then explode potentially like a volcano. So that kind of strategy might be really helpful for feelings of anger and upset because we need to move our bodies through those. And then there's also this idea of anxiety, and anxiety can be felt in the body, but also in the mind. If we're constantly thinking, we can't turn our brain off. And this is when visualizations and doing a guided meditation or something like that can allow us to slowly sit back in our chair and calm our mind and our body through taking deep breaths and maybe imagining a really peaceful, calm place, like putting your feet in the sand, um, being in the mountains, in the forest, right? Those types of visualizations. If even me saying that, you went there, even for a moment, my hope is you could go, oh, that felt really nice, right? So adding that in to help manage stress can be so helpful. Okay, so this is just my little, okay, this is what we did. This is what we went over. What is physical well-being? We learned a lot about the teenage brain, what physical activity can look like, strategies to incorporate that if it isn't already in action. A little bit of, again, more nerdy brain stuff about the sleep and melatonin, and then how to manage stress. So thank you for your time. And yeah, again, another QR code if you're curious about what I do in my practice. My biggest goal is I want to help people really learn, grow, and heal so that we can live more fulfilling lives. And I think that's easier said than done, of course, but I'm a big proponent of bringing these strategies in chunked down ways so that we can practice them and support not only ourselves, but teens really be able to move through life's challenges in a way that keeps them connected with their mind and body and not just distract and dive into social media and use all these other avenues to cope, but really having that ability to move through it in a healthy way. So thank you so much for listening. And I have not been keeping track if there are questions, but now will be the opportunity if there are any.
Thank you so much, Christy. I think, such a great topic of conversation. I think great reminders. Um, from your experience too of, you know, and we always hear that physical activity, are you where, I guess if you had to choose one area to support, especially when I think of just anxiety and, even if there's tiredness or fear, what teenagers go through, would you say physical activity is probably the highest priority to help with the brain function and getting their body aligned? Should that be the top priority?
I think it is one of the more accessible ways that kids can understand how their body feels in the moment. So if you ask a kid to run sprints, they're going to be able to tell you what it feels like to be out of breath, to feel their heart pounding out of their chest. It's a very different feel if they're sitting down and you're like, how does your body feel right now? They might be like, what? What are you talking about? So I like I do think it's a priority, but it doesn't have to be so structured if that doesn't fit the need of the child, right? Just like I mentioned about team sports versus independent sports, if they're not somebody that is going to really enjoy it, it's hard to kind of push that on a kiddo when it doesn't fit for what they want to do. And so there's this balance, but I do think it opens a window for teens so that they can actually experience what their body really does and how it responds outside of, a concerned adult going, okay, well, you're talking about feeling anxious and how does your body feel with that? It just is a little bit more attainable through that physical activity.
And I don't see any questions. And so if anyone does have any, please put it in the chat or the Q&A. I do have some questions, so I'll keep it going as long as I don't see any pop up. You know, as a parent, m- that's the one thing in the conversation I had with my child. Love to get your perspective because he's 11 and, just asking him like, whatever the activity is, whether it is a sport, whether it's, maybe tennis or soccer or basketball or some activity, or we go on a walk every night or play basketball ourselves, just as a family. But I've set the bound, the expectation that you have to do something physical. That has to happen. Just because I know from my own level of stress, I have high anxiety, and I'm not a great sleeper, and so those two combinations can be detrimental to my emotional stability in handling situations. And so, um, what are your thoughts on that? Because that's where I'm like, this
Yeah.
this isn't up for negotiation. I mean, we have to find something. This physical activity, as we all know, helps so much with the endorphins in our brain and
Yeah.
just releasing all of that buildup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think something that I oftentimes say to parents is don't get too hung up on your teen feeling like they want to or they're willing to do something. I think it feels good to us when someone's like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds so fun. I'd love to do that." We're like, "Yes." What a win. But if we can reframe that a little bit and just like you're saying, set the expectation and then there's choice within that expectation, that develops that sense of I have power to choose. And no worries. If you don't want to choose, I got you. I can choose for us. But I've seen kids get introduced to like doing a we dance, right?
Yes.
Using technology in a way that we can still move our bodies, but we can engage in that where we're not isolated. We do it with someone else. We can even, practice some healthy competition. There's some ways that we can find again openings so that kids might go, ooh, okay, I'll try that out. But I think ultimately that strategy that you're saying is, hey, non-negotiable, this is what it is a really important piece that I think sometimes can be really hard to hold and stand by unless like you're saying you're like I recognize how impactful this is for my well-being and mental and sleep and all of the above. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And it can make it fun. And that's like you said, having the choices, having the options to do that, and support that, like rock climbing. And so it doesn't have to be the traditional, oh, there's basketball, there's, what everyone thinks of as those sports, but looking outside of that. And I know cost can be an impact. And the great thing about living in Colorado too, we do have a lot of great days and parks. So the sun's shining and getting out there and just doing some of those things. So I appreciate that because I think that is something that we all need to remember and focus on and help in supporting through that process. I don't see any other questions or chat. Anything else you want to add or say?
Yeah, I don't think so. I feel like, yeah, I think we covered it. And I appreciate your questions too, because again, I think when you're a parent of a teen or an emerging teen, that balance of offering opportunities but also setting expectations can be a really challenging task to come to. And so I think what you said is just such a good reminder. If there are any other parents on this webinar, that I call it a container, setting the container where it's a win-win no matter what. Whether it's I choose that activity or we get to choose it together, win-win.
Well, and I'm just thinking of because talking to my son and through that, and for some reason the springtime, and I don't know if anyone on the call experiences this, but I always tell the teachers, whoever, whatever grade he's in, I notice a heightened level of behavior during the springtime. This time, right after the holidays, I don't know, whatever the weather pattern changes, whatever's happening, but it is definitely heightened. And even in the last week, less of him able to control, which I haven't seen, this behavior in a long time where he is losing that control. But what my husband and I talked about is because, of course, all the kids and loving the video games and some of those things is to have, okay, you got to play basketball outside with a net or walk or do something for 30 minutes and then you can get 20 minutes of screen time. So having those also, no kid's going to jump up for joy. And I think a lot of parents, well, I'm not going to force them. Well, unfortunately, sometimes we have to. We have to have the motivators in order to do that and allowing that. And I saw somebody said karate is a great sport for mental health, physical health. And not only that, too, I love the mention of karate, but also what they teach the kids in self-control and utilizing
Discipline.
discipline.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and sharing that because I think that's great too.
Yeah. And I think karate is a great example too, because I think even with the young adults that I work with, they oftentimes are like, well, I'm not motivated. I'm not motivated to do movement or to get out and go to the gym or, whatever the case is. And so what I always think about with karate is how discipline is so instilled in that modality. And so that discipline is whether I want to or not, it happens.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
those kind of building blocks can be
Yeah.
so helpful.
Discipline and respect, having to respect, the coaches and the sensei or whatever their titles are. But yeah. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all those who joined. I know time is precious and and kudos to you because I think I look at this from a parent perspective of self-care for ourselves as we just continue to grow and learn in our journey. And it isn't easy. So thank you all for that time. Christy, thank you so much for presenting today and offering your expertise in this area. So please check out Christy, what she does, what she offers, how she supports you and your family. And I hope you all have an incredible rest of your week. Check out our resource fair and love to connect. I also just want a little quick, if you are struggling in your journey, not sure where to go, on my website, website, there's a contact me section. I talk to parents for free because I'm just a parent who loves to help other parents. So reach out to me, happy to be there for you. And we are working on a program called the Empowering Parent Program. More to come out on that as well. So thanks you all. Good seeing some and recognizing some of you all. We'll see you soon. Thanks, Christy.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.